The United States federal government should ban fracking in the United States. The United States federal government should ban fracking in the United States. You're supposed to put opposition up here, Nick. Jesus. Okay, call this House to order. Chair recognizes the Prime Minister for a speech not to exceed 7 minutes in length.
Hello everybody, my name is Edward Huggins, and I'm going to get right into this. The topic today is the United States federal government should ban fracking in the United States. Observation 1, the resolutional analysis. This proposition is to be presented as a policy case. Definitions of the key terms in the proposition are: to ban is to officially or legally prohibit. Fracking, as defined by the Oxford Dictionary, is the process of injecting liquid at high pressure into subterranean rocks, boreholes, etc., so as to force open existing fissures and extract oil or gas. The criteria is net benefits, and it's justified because it provides neutral grounds while staying in line with the focus of our nation's core values. Let's get to the thesis. Fracking is a dangerous process. It is harmful to both environmental and human health. Big energy companies have spread misinformation in order to capitalize on fracking profits. Because the technology is so new, we must be cautious going forward. Observation 3, the harms. Harm 1, fracking causes irreparable damage to the environment. The A point here, fracking contributes to global warming. Natural gas is composed largely of methane. According to the latest IPCC report, methane is 34 times stronger heat-trapping gas than CO2. And according to Robert Howard, professor of ecology at Cornell University, 3.6 to 7.9% of the methane from shale gas leaks over the lifetime of a well. Compared to coal, the footprint of shale gas is at least 20% greater, and perhaps more than twice as great over a 20-year time period. B point, fracking can induce earthquakes, and not just one or two, but earthquake swarms. Earthquakes have recently been occurring in places that historically never experienced them. For instance, since records began in 1776, the people of Youngstown, Ohio had never experienced an earthquake. However, in 2011, more than 100 were recorded. And new research published in Geophysical Research Solid Earth suggests fracking is to blame. Katie Carrigan, assistant professor of geophysics at Cornell University, recently led a study of the Jones earthquake swarm. Our results, she said, show a strong link between a small number of natural gas wells and earthquakes migrating up to 50 miles away. These earthquakes take lives and they damage property. Harm 2, fracking hurts people. Many of the fracking additives are toxic, carcinogenic, and or mutagenic, and those additives are leaking into our water supply. According to a report published by the American Geophysical Union in 2013, hydraulic fracturing fluids have spilled into soils and waterways, with at least 7 spills reported in Pennsylvania each year from 2009 to 2011, and some of these spills are several thousands of gallons or larger. According to a study published in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, 75% of wells of drinking water sampled within 1 kilometer of gas drilling in the Marcellus Shale in Pennsylvania were contaminated with methane from the deep shale formations. As a result, our groundwater is being contaminated with toxic, carcinogenic, and mutagenic chemicals, and thousands of people living near natural gas wells no longer have access to safe drinking water. There are also health risks associated with air pollution. Melissa Owen became concerned when her 10-year-old son developed such severe nosebleeds that she had to use tampons to stop the bleeding. Soon after, a blistering rash appeared on his skin. And his sister began having similar nosebleeds. The Colorado family's physician attributed these symptoms to air pollution caused by fracking. He suggested that they move. According to Ruth McDermott, a professor at the Villanova College of Nursing, these acute health problems are common among people living in communities in which fracking occurs. Harm 3. Fracking is new technology, and the consequences are largely unknown. Because shale gas development is so new, Scientific information on the environmental cost is scarce. Only in 2011 have studies begun to appear in peer-reviewed journals, and according to Professor Howard, these studies give reason for pause. And again, according to Professor McDermott, longitudinal reports from long-term exposure to contaminated air and water from water gas extraction do not exist. In other words, we have absolutely no idea what the long-term health effects related to fracking will be, yet we allow the practice to go on regardless. Observation 4, the inherency. Why are we in this predicament? Fracking is exempt from key federal regulations. The Federal Energy Policy Act of 2005 contained a provision that has come to be known as the Halliburton loophole. What the frack is that about? The loophole creates an exemption from regulatory oversight of the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Air Act. Because of this exemption, fracking is allowed to go on, even though it has been proven harmful to the environment and human health. Observation 5, the plan. Our mandate, we will put a temporary moratorium on fracking. The technology is not sufficient at this time to prevent massive environmental degradation and health problems. We need more time to understand all the risks and allow longitudinal studies of the health problems to be completed. The agency is the United States Congress will pass a bill issuing a temporary moratorium on fracking. Existing federal regulatory and state law enforcement agencies will be responsible for enforcing the moratorium. Funding is negligible as we are only passing a bill. Let's get to the solvency. The plan, as outlined, would solve for the harms as stated by putting an end to the practice of fracking. Our environment would be cleaner, our people would be healthier, and a moratorium also gives us time to conduct the necessary research and improve the technology, which must be a requirement if fracking should continue in the future. Advantage 1. Banning fracking would reduce global warming. Global warming is one of the most pressing issues our planet faces today. Millions of people may be displaced from their homes and die. And according to Bjorn Lomborg, it will cost an estimated $5 trillion to society in the future. Eliminating methane leaks caused by the fracking process will significantly decrease the amount of heat-trapping gases in our atmosphere. Reducing the threat of global warming will save money and millions of lives in the future. Advantage 2, cropland will be saved. Cropland is polluted when fracking wastewater contaminates soil and groundwater, causing destruction of crops and increased food prices. According to W.C. Edwards of the Alberta Environmental Center, well fracking can lead to spillage of acids onto pasture or cropland. After well production, animal poisonings can occur from salt water or lead from oil and grease contamination. Banning fracking will save acres of cropland and decrease the price of food in the future. Advantage 3, it saves the water supply. Droughts are occurring in multiple states, including California, creating tension over water use. According to a recent report published by the Ceres Investor Network, 3/4 of gas wells are located in areas where water is scarce, and 55% in areas experiencing drought. Fracking those wells uses 97 billion gallons of water. Banning fracking would release that water for cities and farmers. I now stand open for cross-examination.
Thank you very much. Chair will entertain a cross-examination period of 3 minutes in front of the podium, please. I like the buzzing.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine, because I can't see you.
Oh.
So that tells me time's up.
All right, hi guys, my name's Nick.
Hi, Nick.
How you doing, Edward? Just to start off.
Great.
Great, good, okay. Right to the cross-examination questions. The first one, how many lives and how much property damage has been affected because of fracking?
Thousands.
Thousands, okay.
Millions, perhaps.
Millions, okay. I'll get into that. Second, with even still small traces of fluoride, methane, chlorine, and other dangerous chemicals in our water, how does chemicals from fracking make water undrinkable?
Because the chemicals, like I said, are toxic, carcinogenic, and mutagenic. They're infecting our wells. Methane is infecting our wells. If you guys have seen the movie Gasland, these people literally can light their tap water on fire because of the methane that's polluted the wells. People die because of that, obviously.
And do you concede that methane is already in our drinking water under status quo?
I cannot concede that,
Okay.
but at the same time, not to the degree where you can light your tap water on fire if there is any.
Okay. The third one, how do you know this is caused by fracking if the EPA hasn't even concluded that these fracking chemicals are dangerous? The latest EPA report says that they don't know if fracking is damaging the water supply, and they're not able to conclude definitely that these are actually having an effect. How do you feel about that statement?
Well, if you listen to my evidence, I've provided plenty that there is major problems, and we're talking about scientists who have done the research as the primary sources that I've used.
Okay. I would take the EPA's word, but all right. The fourth, out
Government agency or a primary scientific source?
of the several states that have fracking, can you give any other examples other than Pennsylvania where fracking has affected the water supply?
There's every single area that fracking has gone on. I just used that one example because the Marcellus Shale is one of the largest.
Okay.
But this is going on in Texas at a very large rate. There have been droughts in Texas because of that have been attributed to fracking.
Cool. All right. Do you concede that the Halliburton loophole is from 2005? This inherency argument is false, as the Obama administration actually mandated in 2013 that these chemicals needed to be released to the government. So the Halliburton Act is basically an old document that can't be even listened to.
Well, that's a misconception. What you're saying is that the chemicals need to be released to the government. They need to be disclosed, but that doesn't mean that they're being enforced by the Clean Water Act and Clean Air Act, because if they were, fracking would not be allowed to go on.
Okay. What does your plan mean when you say temporary moratorium ban on fracking? Who decides when it is safe again? And basically, my general thing is I feel this is overly broad and vague. So when is safe safe?
Well, as I stated, when there's more evidence, when there's peer-reviewed scientific evidence that states that fracking no longer pollutes well water the degree it does, when there's enough evidence out there. Like I said, the evidence has only been coming in since 2011. What is that, 3 years? And look at what we're doing. We have thousands of wells up and running right now with all the problems that are listed. There needs to be more evidence, and we need to know exactly what fracking is doing before we can allow it to go on anymore.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Got 3 minutes? Tell me if they use less time.
Okay, yeah.
Thank
the,
you.
like, sound will go off.
Okay, I know, but if they only use 2 minutes, tell me that.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, Chair recognizes the Leader of the Opposition for a speech not to exceed. Can you pull the podium back about 7 inches? Yeah, good. Thank you.
All right. Hi guys. My name's Nick.
Hi, Nick.
Okay, I guess just get right and started on things. I'm going to start out with the disadvantages to their plan, and then I'm actually going to refute their plan in and of itself. So the first is that of job loss. The A point is, according to Jim Estavo Jr. from Bloomberg News on October 23, 2012, fracking has created 1.7 million jobs nationwide and an estimated 3.5 million jobs by 2035. The B subpoint is immediately banning fracking would cut these jobs instantaneously. According to a recent Bureau labor statistic report, 162.1 million individuals are either employed or looking for work. The first point under this is this implies that a little over 1% of the entire United States labor force would be immediately unemployed. This would cause massive negative impacts. The second point is the biggest layoff in history, according to a December 7, 2011 AOL article, was IBM in July of 1993, where 60,000 people were laid off. Let me give you the scenario here. 60,000 people were laid off was the absolute biggest. We're going to unemploy 1.7 million people associated to fracking. If you don't believe that, 400,000 are actually directly related to the industry itself. The rest is through truck workers, through production companies. All these people are now laid off. C point. The majority of these jobs are blue-collar oriented and in rural areas like Pennsylvania and North Dakota. In fact, the governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Corbett, stated in a National Journal article from April 14, 2014, that the Marcellus Shale, what they were talking about, natural gas industry, is supporting over 200,000 jobs that are now going to be shut down, 30,000 of which are linked directly to the fracking industry. The rest are in, well, like I said, trucking and other supplies. So first point of this is natural gas production has increased jobs substantially and boosted their economy, especially in the recession. So D is the impacts. There are 3 distinct impacts if fracking were to be banned. First, families that solely rely on fracking now have no income. The average number of children per household is typically higher in rural areas. So this means that affording food, insurance, and other materials for their children is going to be near impossible. Families that have a hard time affording food typically steal from grocery stores and local markets in order to eat. You can look towards Detroit, that up until their bankruptcy, you can see that crime rates have doubled, and robbery as well had doubled because that they have lived in this impoverished and low style of life just trying to eat. Second, the applications for unemployment and government-aided programs, this is the biggest one, guys, would increase dramatically. Since the economic highlight of 2007, food stamps and other government programs has increased by 15%. The government, think about this, can't afford to receive 1.7 million application and sustain the level of economic stability it currently endures. We already borrow around $1 trillion every year from other countries. We can't afford to increase this number provided for unemployed U.S. citizens. Okay, second is never-ending oil dependence. The A point. In Obama's latest State of the Union address, he stated that energy independence should be America's #1 goals. B point. According to BBC News economist Richard Anderson in an April 2nd, 2014 article, energy independence will come about only through cheap and abundant shale oil and gas. So this is the only way we can achieve energy independence is through shale oil and gas, which could help spark a golden age for U.S. manufacturing. Okay, U.S. energy prices are far lower than those in Europe and Japan, and this fact, together with rising wages in China, will basically drop down the price of natural gas for us all. So what this means for us is we can not only afford gas and energy better, but that we can release our dependence from the Middle East and have a self-sustaining system, and I'll explain why this is good. So C is this piece of evidence implies that United States corporations are looking towards leaving fossil fuels, especially from the Middle East, and turning towards United States natural gas. So the one under this, with the United States being the number one supplier and exporter of natural gas, this is a very tangible possibility, and he believes at the rate of progress, Anderson believes, we could be fully independent by the year 2035. So it's very close, and if we were to have a complete ban, we would take away 40% of all natural gas the United States currently receives. 40% gone with an immediate ban. Okay, this leads to two impacts. First, since the United States is extracting natural gas at a rapid rate, the cost of attaining it would be lower than fossil fuel, therefore driving all of our prices down as us are paying for it. And according to Bjorn Lomborg, can't pronounce that, the skeptical environmentalist, all sources indicate that the prices of oil and gas will rise markedly. Some suggesting it will even triple by the end of the century. Likewise, all sources indicate the prices for new energy sources, like fracking, natural gas, will decline. So oil's on the upswing, or on the uprise for prices, and natural gas is on the downward swing, so we should invest in that. Second, the United States will no longer have significant support system for bad regimes in the Middle East. Okay, first impact. An example of this is Saudi Arabia. This is an authoritative, totalitarian government run by the royal Saudi family who own the majority of the country's wealth. The citizens live in dirt-poor, starving environments where women are oppressed. The second part of this is the U.S. supports them because they're our #1 oil supplier. So we support their decisions. We give them troops, we give them money to support the royal family, and we perpetuate the cycle of oppression and allow it to continue. We even have an expensive military base in the region to protect our assets. The United States is supporting policies that we wouldn't usually stand for just to protect our oil. The production to becoming energy independent and removing ourselves from the totalitarian regions means that basically we don't have to support these bad regimes that are starving their people, that are killing them off. We're not giving them weapons. We're not saying, hey guys, this is okay. And instead, we focus on our own energy supply and what we need to do. So, okay. Which is important for us being independent as well. So it helps our economy, it helps us as citizens, but it also helps us not give supplies and help out other countries. Okay, here we go, right to Edward's case. So the harm one, bad damage. Methane's 34 times stronger than carbon. Okay, here's the deal. There's a new, according to National Geographic, I have here on here as well, maybe my partner can extend this, but according to a National Geographic article, that I don't believe I'm getting, oh, here we go. On March 19, 2014, so a new article, James Hill, founder of Energy Innovation Gas Frac, has introduced a new way to do fracking, and this means plugging in the holes of methane. So this is the old style, right? He's talking about the old style. Now there's a new style where we can plug in the methane, and in 2014, Congress passed the plan where we have to decrease the methane leaks by at least 40% within the next, I think it's 10 years or so. Maybe you can, I don't remember the exact nature. But they basically passed the plan in 2014. So that's a big deal. Okay, my second argument to this is that methane is already lower than the production of carbon that is being emitted right now. So EPA, that low on time. All right, I'll go right into it. So basically about the water argument, there's also new technology saying we can reuse water instead of using the 20 million or however many gallons Edward came up here and said we have to use. Therefore, that none of these impacts and environmental damages through methane or water is valid under this case. Thank you.
I now stand open for cross-examination in front of the podium. Thank you. We'll explore cross-examination for a period of 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hey, Dick.
What's up, Ed?
How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
All right.
How's your day?
Let's get started.
All right.
So, I noticed a lot of newspaper and magazine articles like Bloomberg, The Economist, BBC, I even heard AOL in there. You do realize that these are secondary sources, correct?
They are, but they come directly from economists, and actually I stated the economists that wrote within those articles. So they are news articles, but they are economists from like prestigious universities that are writing.
Okay, but you do realize that in secondary sources they can often be inaccurate, and reporters can often skew the actual data to fit their own agenda, correct?
I'd somewhat agree with that, but I think that when you use direct sources from the actual economists, and when some of these were written by the economists themselves, like in the Bloomberg article, I don't believe that, no, it's the journalist's problem.
So you're saying the AOL article was written by an economist?
The AOL article was responding to the top 5 companies that had job layoffs. So this isn't talking about environmental degradation or fracking, it's talking about the companies that actually laid off the people. So 64,000 jobs I don't think could really be misconstrued through an AOL.
Irregardless, you'd have to agree that a primary source from the horse's mouth, and I'll grant this economist, I'll grant that, but a scientific source is going to be more valuable than a secondary source written by AOL, correct?
I think an economist source is actually going to be more reliable than a scientific.
Well, I granted you're economist, but another, like in these other sources like AOL, Bloomberg, I mean, practically your whole brief was secondary sources.
I don't agree with that. I've got a source from JSTOR in there that I used, and a source from, I believe it's EBSCO as well that I used in there. Twice, so maybe like a half and half, but I still think a lot of them are primary sources from economists.
I still think that you would agree that in
We can agree to
in
disagree.
general, taking a secondary source over a primary source is probably not the right way to go, and we should probably trust that secondary source with a grain of salt, correct?
No.
In general.
I don't agree.
Okay. All right. Now let's get to your case. So, are you familiar with some of the problems associated with some of your proposed alternatives? Like you mentioned, this gel. Are you familiar with any of the criticisms or?
I didn't bring up the gel.
You didn't bring up the gel?
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing it.
Oh.
Yeah. I didn't get to it.
Well, you mentioned the water. All right. So you mentioned that we might have to use water in the future, correct?
I said recycled water, yes.
So we would use recycled water in the future.
Yes.
Okay. And you didn't? Did you give us any evidence? Did you give us any kind of indication how that would work?
I don't know the direct process, but no, it was through gas fracking. He was the CEO of a company that's actually using it in Texas right now.
So you just kind of assume that it'll work.
It is working in Texas right now. They're using it.
But I just asked if you had any indication of how it worked.
The scientific processes of it, no, I don't know. But I know they are using it, and it is effective right now in Texas.
Okay. Well, anyway, the bottom line is that's it.
Thank you so much. Chair will now hear from a member of the government for a speech not to exceed 7 minutes in length.
Hi everyone, I'm Wen.
Hi, Win.
Just now, my opponent mentioned that how ban fracking can cause more problems than we expected. He addressed the importance for the United States to achieve the goal of energy independence, and believed that a ban in fracking will cause negative impacts to our economy, which include job loss and a shift of energy reliance to other countries. While the government emphasized many benefits on energy independence, we as the government believe that environmental concern and human health should be put before material gain. To start off, I want to first restate the phases of the government. It is imperative that the United States government to ban fracking because it brings numerous harmful effects to the environment and it threatens people in the planet. Now, I want to restate some point my partner just made. First of all, fracking put constraints to our water supply. According to the EPA, 70 to 140 billions of gallons of water was used to fracture 35,000 wells in the United States each year. This is the average annual water consumption of 40 to 80 cities, each with a population of 50,000. The extraction of so much water for fracking has raised concern in water supply for human consumption. This is problematic for many communities, especially those in the rural areas where they have limited water supply. Recently, cities under fracking have reported they are suffering from water shortage. According to RT, a report by the Serious Investor Network shows that 75% of the 40,000 oil and gas wells drilled since 2001 now report have a worse gas leak problem. Among all of the states, Texas now has reported to have a serious water shortage problem. To make the matter even worse, fracking is expected to drought the state over the next 5 years. And Texas is not the only state that have water supply issue due to fracking. In California, 96% of the new wells were located in areas where water is limited. The state even declared a drought emergency last few months ago. Besides water supply, fracking affects the water quality. The process of fracking generates millions of gallons of wastewater containing thousands of pounds of chemical. The study done by Duke University sampled drinking water from wells in Pennsylvania and New York and determined that the concentration of methane, the main component of natural gas, is much higher when those wells is within 1 kilometer of the fracking site. Household drinking water that comes from wells near the fracking site contains levels of methane 6 times greater than water commonly elsewhere. Other toxic chemicals found in contaminated groundwater can cause numerous health accidents. For example, residents from Texas have reported that drinking water in Texas has been affected by gas drilling. A more serious case appeared in Colorado. A woman named Chris Mobadi believed her neurological system was damaged by drinking water that was contaminated by the drilling wells around her home. The result? She has 2 tumors removed from her glands. Harm number 2. Fracking accelerates air pollution that has significant impacts to human health. Thanks to natural gas drilling, many of the areas under fracking have smoke worse than downtown LA nowadays. States like Utah, Pennsylvania have already massively increased in air pollution. Residents reported suffer from asthma, headache, sore throat, and even breathing difficulties. Furthermore, according to Phil Cabot, in a study published by Human Ecological Risk Assessment in November 2012, more than 15 non-methane hydrocarbons were found near gas wells in rural Colorado, including 35 of them that affect brain and nervous system, and even cancer-causing benzene. Or this disease could take up to 15 to 30 years to develop. And a new study even discovered that fracking affects babies. They reported that the proximity of fracking sites increased the likelihood of low birth weight infants than more than half. The result of these findings is shocking. And all this are just the beginning. Fracking caused more earthquakes, but it also caused more emission, accelerating the impacts of climate change. While natural gas itself produces few direct carbon emission, the risk of methane leakage during the fracturing process potentially make fracking as bad as for the climate as coal. According to a 2012 study conducted by researchers in Princeton University, he said, if more than 3.2% of methane leak out from the natural gas wells, it was no better than coal in terms of global warming over a 20-year time span. The IPCC latest report also states that over a 20-year time frame, methane has a global warming potential of 86 compared to carbon dioxide, up to its previous estimate of 72. What's more, EPA has underestimated the significance of the amount and the potency of the methane emission. This underestimates the climate impacts of hydraulic fracking. This study, according to the study published by PNAS, the study takes Pennsylvania as an example. The researchers discovered that the emission rate per second were 1,000 times higher than those estimated by EPA. In the long term, fracking will accelerate climate change and therefore worsen global warming. So, here comes to the solvency. Why a temporary moratorium will work? It works because it eliminates the harms as stated, ensuring the health and safety and lives from the American. Water is one of the most precious resources in our earth. Ensuring its supply and its quality should be put in the first place. By putting a moratorium, we can minimize air pollution and earthquakes. It also saves extra costs for spending to cover people's health costs, food costs, debt costs by the side effect of the agricultural industry. What's more, many environmental harms couldn't be easily solved by any of the solutions mentioned by the opposition, because there are consequences that we still don't know how to regulate yet. Take earthquake as an example. Geologists are just beginning to think about the long-term implication of fracking to earthquakes. We don't even know what happens to the structural integrity of the bedrock once we withdraw all the liquid and the gases from it, and no one has a definitive answer right now. And as my partner Ed has just mentioned, the long-term effects of fracking are still largely unknown, and we need more time to learn about the risks and get more information about fracking. Advantages. The first advantage is saving water supply. Fracking uses thousands of unknown chemicals and it increases the pressure of the mounds in some regions. And these chemicals are polluting our water supply when they leak. For this reason, I believe the United States government should ban fracking in the United States, and I now stand open for cross-examination.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Chair will now hear a cross-examination in front of the podium, not to exceed 3 minutes in length.
I'm Nathan.
Hi, Nathan.
Hi, Nathan.
Look nice today, Nathan.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah.
You said that the purpose of this proposition is for human health before material.
Win, face the audience.
I just wanted to talk about the Princeton study that you had. And it says that methane leaks are substantially greater, and it counteracts the benefits provided by switching from coal to natural gas, correct?
Yeah.
Are you aware that methane only survives in our atmosphere 10% compared to CO2?
Yeah.
Okay. In the conclusion of that article, I actually have it on my sources, it says that despite these elevated changes, or these elevated rates in leaks, that over a 100-year rather than 20-year period, we'll still have benefits in accord with our atmosphere. Did you read that?
Yeah, I read that that methane, although methane is not the most prevalent greenhouse gases, is the second most prevalent of the greenhouse gases. And according to the study I've just mentioned, EPA has even underestimated the amount of methane that actually in our atmosphere, and therefore I doubt if the time frame for a 100-year period that we still have a net decrease of the greenhouse gas over 100-year period. I'm not sure about this.
Sure. Well, I mean, the 20-year period, I'm not going to argue that. It's beneficial in 20 years, but I'm not looking for 20-year. I want to live longer than 20 years. And Nivian, the only time I'm going to say this, the children and my children's children, it's going to be 100 years from now, so that's what I'm a little bit more concerned with. So moving on, did you watch the movie Gasland, of them lighting water on fire?
Yep.
Okay, did you know that that town is also near a coal mining plant?
Yep.
And did you know that coal also releases significant amounts of methane into our atmosphere?
Yes.
Is it possible that the methane in the water was from the coal plant and not just from the fracking?
Yes, it is possible, but some of my study have also showed that like fracking does have affect our water supply, and the contamination problem this was caused by fracking to some extent.
Okay. Are you aware that coal releases twice the amount of carbon dioxide when we generate electricity, and it's very inefficient?
Yeah.
Do you think that fracking can be beneficial in this regard?
No.
Why not?
Because even though coal and you mentioned coal and fossil fuels released twice, but in the long term, natural gas is not that beneficial as well. Natural gas clearly is not the long-term solution to meet our energy needs. I'll explain it later.
Thank you.
How much time was that?
2 seconds.
2 seconds left? Thank you. Chair will now recognizes the member of the opposition for a speech not to exceed 7 minutes in length.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Nathan again.
Hi, Nathan.
I just want to say that the government's plan to ban fracking, if it's put in action, it will create profoundly negative environmental, economic, and occupational consequences. As a member of the opposition, I strongly oppose this plan and try to utilize a multifaceted approach to illustrate how their plan creates more problems than it provides solutions. Excuse me. All right, so I'm going to begin with the inherency, actually. According to the IPCC of 2014, reducing the amount of CO2 in electricity generation is a key component in the cost-effective mitigation strategies of atmospheric levels. This decarbonization process occurs more rapidly in electricity generation than in any other industry, buildings, and transportation sectors. Since natural gas emits roughly half of the amount of CO2 that coal or oil does, this will be beneficial for our greenhouse effects. According to the IEA of 2012, the total amount of fossil fuels for carbon dioxide emissions has actually fallen from the years of 2006 to 2011. This is a 7.7% decrease. And what's responsible for this? Actually, in electricity generation, coal has gone from 42% to 37%, while natural gas has increased from 25% to 30%, exactly 5% each way. So, as stated by Chief Dr. Faith Briel, of the chief economist of the IEA, he says the replacement of coal by shale gas is a key factor that happened in the United States, and it could very well happen in China and any other countries, and it could definitely help in reducing CO2 emissions. I want to bring up the methane concern that the proposition has. In the study from Princeton and the EDF, they say that shifting from coal to natural gas and electricity generation will have immediate climate benefits as long as the leakage is below 3.2%. Methane, as we had mentioned, is very potent, about 33 times than CO2, but it lasts only 10% as long in our atmosphere. And the EPA has recognized, the problem of methane and the leakage that fracking may produce. So they've actually implemented the Green Completions Act that are set to take place in 2015. Conditions of this act say that close monitoring of greenhouse gases through mandatory infrared cameras. They're about $80,000 to $100,000 each, which is negligible concerning how much money that these fracking operations make. They flare the methane in an effort to reduce its potency in our atmosphere. They require equipment that separates gas and liquid hydrocarbons in the flowback, or the waste, which will be treated and disposed of. These green completions are expected to decrease the amount of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere by 95%, or VOCs in our atmosphere. These changes are cost effective, so government, or the fracking companies will not have any problems implementing them, because the money that they make from selling back their waste actually covers the cost of these mandatory cameras. So let me continue. The benefits of switching to natural gas hold despite recently discovered levels of methane. As I had already mentioned in the cross-examination, the amount of methane is higher than the 3.2%, but even if we keep it at this rate and we don't implement these policies, it is still beneficial in a 100-year cycle. So when we talk about the amount of jobs that are lost, his are significantly higher. 600,000 jobs, according to the IHS, will be lost tomorrow if their plan is put into motion. This could mean 800,000 jobs in 2015 and potentially 1.6 million in 2035. And this job loss is not limited to the shale industry, because each job in the shale industry produces roughly 2.35 jobs outside of it. So this multiplier effect in jobs was studied by Jeremy Weber of Colorado, or he studied Colorado, Texas, and Wyoming. For every $1 million in revenue, 2.35 jobs were created. Let's see, and this allowed for jobs, wages, and household income to also increase. I also want to talk about their plan and how it talks about old fracking techniques, and there have been 4 new fracking techniques that can mitigate all their problems. So let's talk about petroleum fracking. Instead of using water, they use highly pressurized petroleum gas that is injected into these wells to break apart rocks. Since the gas, or the gel, turns into gas, 99% is extracted and there's no waste. Let's go to using recycled water. Rather than using new water and fresh water every time, we could use recycled water and eliminate millions and millions of gallons of water. What I want to talk about is a new study provided by NS Energen LLC. Submitted a patent in 2013, and it takes highly pressurized carbon dioxide in the place of fresh water altogether. There's no water, no additives, no toxics, no fault lines, and it uses the CO2 that is released in electricity generation, and it uses that to extract more precious natural gas from beneath the surface. So I want to say that if we allow fracking to continue as normal, it will allow millions of people to create their jobs and millions more in the future. It will allow us to limit our carbon, or our atmospheric levels of greenhouse gases, not in 20 years, but when it really counts, 100 years from now and even further. And I believe that the United States can remain a significant player in the global economy if we utilize the resources that we have. I now stand open for cross-examination.
Thank you very much. How much time do we have left? We had a minute left. Okay.
do you think?
Hey,
Okay. In your brief, to your knowledge, how many percentage of carbon dioxide and methane contribute to the greenhouse effect right now?
according to the skeptical environmentalists, I think it was like 60% for CO2.
How about methane?
I'm not entirely sure. I think it's like 10%.
Okay. In your brief, you said that even if we keep the methane leakage rates constant, which is higher than currently expected, there will still be a net decrease in greenhouse gases over a 100-year period, right?
Yes.
But do you agree that the EPA has political interest?
I wouldn't rule that out, no.
Are you aware to the fact that EPA has underestimated the amount of methane that is measured and reported in the 2013 study? Okay. So to what extent do you believe that fracking is safe?
I believe that it's safe if we implement some of the strategies that I had mentioned. You're talking about the older ones. I'm talking about using not less water, but no water whatsoever.
Okay. But do you aware that fracking now enjoy the exemption from 7 statutes, such as under the exemption of Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, and Safe Water Drink Act?
What about the green completions that take place in 2015?
Okay. So in your brief, you mentioned a company now use some innovative strategies. This actually does not use water toxic additives. Can you briefly explain how this works?
Yeah, when you generate electricity, it emits CO2, regardless of whether you use natural gas, you use coal, you use oil. That CO2 is sequestered, and it's highly pressurized, and it's injected into these deep wells, and it comes back as a gas, and there's no wastewater, so it uses no water, and it essentially turns waste, which is harmful to our atmosphere, into something positive that we can generate more electricity with.
Okay. And you mentioned that these strategies are new right now, right?
Yes.
And so there is no study to prove that it actually works?
No, that patent was submitted in 2013. It's like as Edward said, it's a new process, and it needs to be tested. But to limit it when it's in its infancy it's a big problem.
So you believe it can solve all the problems, the water problem caused by fracking?
No, it can't solve all problems, but I believe it solves a great amount of them.
Okay, last question. Do you believe fracking undercuts the renewable energy industry?
Excuse me?
Do you believe fracking undercuts the renewable energy industry?
No, I think it'd be supplemented to the renewable energy. Like,
Okay.
we've already been over that wind and water and solar aren't efficient, so I feel like we could supplement fracking with those technologies.
Okay, that's the only question.
Thank you very much. Now time for rebuttals and refutation.
First step reputation.
4 steps of refutation. Hopefully we'll even hear the 4th step today. Thank you. And we'll first hear from the Prime Minister of the government. For a speech, let's see, how's our time? For a speech not to exceed 4 minutes in length. Yeah.
Okay. All right. They said that the answer to global warming is to turn towards natural gas. We disagree. If you'll recall, according to Professor Howarth of Cornell University, natural gas over a 20-year time period is actually a greater contributor to global warming than the conventional sources. The member of the opposition even agreed to that. Now he's stating that the real concern is 100 years. That is absurd. 20 years from now, natural gas is worse for global warming, and it's going to take 100 years just to break even. It doesn't get better, it just gets even with coal and oil. That's 100 years from now. So it is not an alternative at all. Therefore, that harm still stands, and we're solving for one of the most pressing issues that this planet is facing today, which is global warming, and we all need to keep in mind that fact. Now, number 2, they said that Gasfrac, this company that's making a gel, this petroleum gel that's going to replace water, okay, and that there's all these alternatives out there that can solve for our issues, right? Well, we disagree. 15 environmental groups, including the Sierra Club and the Natural Resources Defense Council, are opposed to the propane gel replacement and these alternatives. Deb Nardone from the Sierra Club said that given the risks of explosions, it is clear that propane fracking just substitutes one set of problems for another set of even worse problems. So if we're going to have a debate about these alternatives, we could do that, but they are much worse, and that's why they're not being adopted. You don't see that happening anywhere. They're not adopting these technologies because A, they're cost prohibitive, the ones that are actually semi-workable, and B, there's not enough evidence behind them at this time, and 3, a lot of them are a lot worse, like this propane deal. So, and that actually stands to our whole case, which is that we need more evidence. We need more time to gather the research to figure out what we can do to have alternatives to the current status quo. And once those alternatives are presented and peer-reviewed, tested, and they find that they're workable, fracking can continue in the future, but not now at its present state. So, they said that banning fracking is non-solvent because of a possibility that methane leakage will be completely gone in the future, that the EPA is working out some system to reduce the methane leakage, right? We disagree. First of all, that possibility is just hypothetical with no guarantee. So therefore, our plan is still solvent for the problems today. Again, this is a situation where he's saying it'll start sometime in the future. We don't know if it'll even work. We don't know if it will be successful. If it does work, we need time to test out those possibilities. So only peer-reviewed studies that can come forth and corroborate those findings will be acceptable to us. We're not going to take the word of industry CEOs that are telling us this stuff works, because they've been feeding us lies for years. No. Number 5, they said that fracking will cost jobs and lead to economic decline. This is the big crux of this debate, right? Okay, we disagree though. We knew that this debate would be about environmental and human health versus the economy from the get-go. We don't deny that banning fracking will have an impact on the economy. However, as the opposition stated, energy production is still necessary, and more jobs will be open in traditional energy sectors like coal and oil. Additionally, according to the Energy Information Administration, renewable energy will account for about 1/3 of new electricity generation added to the U.S. grid over the next 3 years. Hiring in that sector is booming. So while there will be an impact on the economy, it will not be nearly as drastic as the opposition is making it seem. So, this is a competing vision of the future that I'm offering. A planet, a country where people are healthier, global warming is reduced, our water isn't being contaminated, you can't light it on fire, versus jobs, money. We can have other ways of getting jobs and money.
For all those reasons.
For all those reasons, you should vote for the government today.
Thank you. Cheryl, now the leader of the opposition for 4-step refutation.
I was thinking about getting louder and faster. What do you think? more intense, right? Okay. Hi, my name's Nick.
Hey, Nick.
All right, so I have a couple different things here. So first of all, they say that oil-based fracking is bad. We disagree. There's already 2,000 shales that have used this method, this propane-based method in Texas, and the only bad danger that it's had is a finger cut from a drill. So basically, therefore, this method is not bad. They've already done it 2,000 times in places in Texas, and they refuse to talk about the other 3 methods that my partner brought up, talking about reusable water, which therefore significantly takes away any impacts they have in their second advantage, and also that of trying to find waterless. Okay, they say that fracking causes earthquakes and affects the water. We disagree because earthquakes haven't been any larger than California's and haven't shown any damage, at least from what we've seen, to infrastructure. So millions of lives that have actually been lost is just not happening. And new H2O regulations, like we stated within this new this March 2014 report, shows that there's now regulations on these companies, and that fracking isn't a bad method when it's done right, but it's the negligence of the people that are performing these methods that fracking has turned into this monster. So these new regulations that have been placed on these companies in 2014 by Congress significantly decreases the methane by 40% within the next decade, and also with these new petrol-based substances and also reusable water, we can see that all these environmental damages and contamination of water can be a thing of the past. They're talking about a lot of, okay, so therefore, sorry, so that's the because. So therefore,
thank you.
Yes, so therefore, the new methods of fracking far outweigh any disadvantages the old ones that they proposed can offer. Third is, they say that more lives would be affecting with fracking. I want you to understand this. We disagree because 1.7 million, or take my partner's 600,000, that's fine too, are lost in an instant, like that, are gone. And he talks about, well, oil companies will hire more, or renewables will hire more, but he showed you no actually analysis as to how many more that they will actually project hiring. And when you're talking about laying off 1.7 million people or 600,000 within a day or a week, you're talking about unemployment, all these unemployment applications that have to go into the government for approval. And this is not only going to tank our economy, they've got to find new work, which in a recession, we all know how that works out. And basically it's just going to cause a giant mess. Again, you can look towards my analysis where back in 1993, 60,000 jobs were lost instantaneously, and that was the biggest layoff we've ever seen in history. We've never seen 600,000 or 1.7 million jobs lost within an instance. Therefore, people would be severely more affected if we were to get rid of fracking today, if we were to ban this method, than if we were to wait out on it. Okay, the last point of information I have is they say fracking should be banned because it is new. We disagree. Since it is new, we need to not ban it, but allow it to continue and find new ways and better ways of making this more efficient. Thank you.
Thank you. You had 50 seconds left? Okay,
Oh,
thank you.
I didn't know that. Okay. So, I have more to talk about. We disagree since it is new. We need to not ban it, but allow it to continue and even raise the money for it, raise the funds for it if we can, to allow these new technologies. Like my partner said, in 2014, these 4 new technologies that are significantly decreasing the environmental impacts, we need to allow the system to continue. The problem is if they put a ban on it now, the litigation and the process it will take to reverse that ban and all the influence from the oil companies to reverse that ban is going to be near impossible. Once fracking is gone, it is going to be very, very, very hard to try to get it back with lobbying groups and everything else. Again, they didn't provide a bright line for you as to when it's good enough. And in that case, banning is going to be a very real thing and hard to reverse. So therefore, we think that because this is a new method and because this is a new way of doing things, through mine and my partner's analysis, it will be better in the future, we'll be more independent in the future, and we should focus on fracking now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chair will now hear from...
Just 1 minute, just so you
I thought you were doing 1 and then 0. I thought that was. Okay.
Chair will now hear from the member of the government for a rebuttal of 4-step refutation not to exceed 4 minutes in length.
Hi everyone, I'm Wayne again.
I win
My
again.
opponent mentioned that the amount of methane released through fracking is negligible. I disagree because our side have already proven that methane emission is 34 times stronger than carbon dioxide and is the most damaging of any kind of greenhouse gas. My opponent mentioned that there would be an immediate climate benefit as long as the leakage from the production is below 3.2%. But don't forget, the EPA is a federal agency that somehow has political interest. The fact that methane emissions are even underestimated by EPA according to a 2004 study published in the Proceeding of National Academy of Science, which states that methane emission rates per second are underestimated by 1,000 times than the EPA estimated. This shows that methane still have a largely unknown and could be far from what we expected. We therefore disagree with the opponent claims that methane is a limited greenhouse gas, and continue using natural gas clearly isn't a solution in long term, especially to solve our climate change. Besides, my opponent addressed the negative impacts to the economy, such as job loss. While we recognize that banning fracking may cause many people get unemployed, but continued such practice also led to problems such as to our size of our economy. Fracking affects our livestock and agricultural industry. Some studies have shown that it threatens our food supply when animals and crops die due to the exposure to this chemical. This is problematic because right now there's no common procedure for isolating this livestock to expose to these chemicals. Furthermore, increase our dependence on natural gas would undercut the renewable energy industry because when natural gas is so cheap, no more investors will be willing to put money into wind and solar energy. So, why should you vote for a government? My opponent's argument only mainly focuses on the negative impacts of the economy. It fails to recognize or respond to any environmental harms as we stated. Why? Because we know that these harms right now don't even have a solution, and it cannot be easily regulated. Although my opponent provides solutions of how companies have tried using new strategies to solve their water problem. However, all these strategies are still new, and right now we have no enough evidence to make sure that this solution can solve all the problem caused by water contamination. And the fact that fracking uses a huge amount of water resources that could affect our human consumption is proven in many studies. If fracking really brings more goods than harm, why over 250 communities like the United Kingdom and France have already passed resolution to stop fracking? The answer is obvious. Fracking brings disastrous, harmful effects to our environment, which is irreplaceable, and many of them couldn't be easily solved with solution or regulation. Take the earthquake example. And a water shortage, air pollution, the effects of rural communities, agricultural pollution, livestock, or even leaking wells and oil expositions, etc. and etc. As Ed has just mentioned in his rebuttal and his earthquake example, fracking is simply accompanied with so much unknown risks that we still do not have a definitive answer right now. That's why a temporary moratorium will work, because this will work the best, because we need more time to examine the long-term impacts of fracking. In this case, I've proven that fracking is bad for our environment, our population, and our community. The cost of fracking definitely outweighs its benefit. And you should vote for an affirmative. Thank you.
Thank you, Wynn. Chair will now hear from a member of the opposition for a rebuttal not to exceed 4 minutes in length, utilizing the 4 steps of refutation.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Nathan.
Hi, Nathan.
All right. They said that this 100-year plan is breaking even, or that it's not beneficial, and I disagree. The amount of methane that's produced is negligible, and it will have profound effects upon our atmosphere. That's not true. If we don't switch from coal to natural gas, that's when we'll be negatively affected, and the greenhouse gases will accelerate at a rapid rate. They also implied that we have the technologies necessary to continue to be energy independent, and that's not true at all. We disagree. Wind and solar, nuclear are not efficient. They often cost more to store than they do to produce, and we cannot have the entire United States rely on these inefficient and expensive technologies. Just to highlight some of the costs, the IEA presented an article that compared the cost of heating your home with natural gas compared to that with oil. In other states where it actually is cold and they actually have to heat their houses, it would cost $732 to heat your house from October to March with natural gas. If you wanted to use oil, this would skyrocket to $2,535 for the same amount of heat during the same amount of time. And that was in 2011. That's likely higher now. So let's continue. They basically provided you with nosebleeds, asthmas, tumors, and lighting your water on fire. That doesn't occur everywhere, and that is drawing basically hysteria to this topic. Those are localized accidents, if they are even true, and if that wasn't from fracking. That could have been caused by coal mining. To continue that point, there was a meta-analysis that sampled all the news reports and press releases, and only 25% of those contain scientific journals or peer-reviewed quotes. They said that water and methane are the concerns. We disagree, because with these 4 new technologies that are being tested, that are being implemented, we can solve both of those problems without water, without pollutants, and without getting near fault lines to deal with earthquakes. Especially the NSLCC one, which takes carbon dioxide that is a waste that we're trying to keep out of the atmosphere and use it to create energy and something more beneficial. So with the last of my time, I would like to ask you a few questions. Are you okay by banning fracking? Are you okay with eliminating 600,000 jobs now, 800,000 jobs in 2015, and 1.6 million in 2035? Are you okay with increasing our dependence on foreign soil when we have so many resources at our disposal? Are you okay with increasing our amount of greenhouse gases when we do not need to, and it's unnecessary, and it's quite frankly inefficient? And are you willing to trade the government's theoretical concerns for proven results that we've had within the last 10 years? And this technology is in its infancy, and we can improve it. And we've already taken strides to do so that take place in 2015. Thank you very much.
Hi. Got 40 seconds left? Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Let's give them a nice round of applause. Okay, now it's time for the judges to do their duties, to individually look over your notes, to think carefully about what you just heard, and come to an individual decision. You need a ballot? Okay.
Yeah, ballot over here, sorry. I got two extra. Oh, thanks. I guess it's the last one.
I did it the wrong time. Ballot blank. Where's my policy folder? Here it is. Oh, did you came in late. Did you get the debate group? Did you get this?
Oh, is this the same thing I thought?
Yeah, I'll get it. Yeah. And it's 4 minutes. And you give me a copy of the outline of your speech before you speak.